This is the Intel Arc A750, and it recently saw a price reduction from its launch MSRP of $290 down to $250. $250 brand new is a very attractive price point for a modern day graphics card. If you're looking to build a new PC and are on a smaller budget, this is the price range you want to be targeting. Now, normally in a video like this, I'd have a PC sitting right here next to me, but the one being featured for this video was actually something that I built for a friend of mine's nephew, and it's already been picked up as of recording this, but I did think ahead and recorded footage of it so that I could pop it in right here. Hopefully it looks somewhat natural. This PC costs $700, and that's using all brand new parts that's no more than a generation old, and I'm very happy with the performance it's able to put out given the price. This is actually going to kind of be a hybrid video. I want to showcase what you can put together for $700 that can game well as record and stream and do things like that. But also, I wanted to put this A750 graphics card head to head with its competition at the same price point. That is what AMD and Nvidia has to offer at $250. That way, you can see what options you have and decide for yourself what's worth your money. So yeah, let's check out what's in this build right after a quick word from this video sponsor. Hey, it's me again. I am this video sponsor. This shirt I'm currently wearing is one of my designs from my official merch. If you're interested in this or the first design I released, you can check them out using the links in the description below. It's a great way to support the channel while also getting a little something in return. Also, I want to remind you that I stream every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time right here on YouTube, where I talk about computer stuff, deal hunt, help people out with their PC related questions, things like that. We just hang out every single Wednesday. It's a pretty chill vibe. I hope to see you there. But alright, that's it for the plug. Let's get back to the video. As always, links for all the parts used in this build will be in the description in case you want to check any of them out, but this is what we're working with. Starting off with the processor, I went with the Intel i3 12100F. Don't let this being an i3 mislead you. This is a very solid budget processor that offers great performance at around the $100 price point. It's got 4 cores, 8 threads, and in gaming, it actually trades blows with AMD's Ryzen 5 5600, which is noticeably more expensive at around $40 more. For cooling, I went with the white SE214XT from ID Cooling. We were going for a white aesthetic, and this fit the bill at only $20 while offering great performance. If you don't care about aesthetics at all, feel free to save $20 here and use the stock cooler. That works just as well. i3s don't run that hot. Paired with the 12100F is the ASRock B660M Pro RS. This is a very entry-level B660 board, often going on sale for less than $100. I picked it up for $95, and for that price, it gets the job done. I'd be comfortable pairing this board with up to an i5, but any further than that and you want to consider spending a bit more money on something higher end. For this build though, it's more than sufficient. For memory, we've got 16GB of Team Group Delta RGB in white. This is a 3200 CL16 kit. That's a true latency of 10 nanoseconds, which is very standard. Storage-wise, we also have Team Group with the MP33 in 1TB. No DRAM on this entry-level SSD, but it is TLC as opposed to most budget drives that are QLC, and it does utilize HMB, aka host memory buffer, which leverages system memory in place of dedicated DRAM cache for improved performance. This drive is pretty much $50 or less all the time, which is a great price for the capacity and performance. Power supply pricing is still all over the place, so I used one that I picked up a few months ago on sale, the Deepcool DQ750M V2L. This power supply is a bit overkill for this system, but was appropriately priced for the overall budget. The power supply, so long as it's a decent unit and at the appropriate wattage for the hardware, won't really impact gaming performance, so there's flexibility here to choose based on what's priced well at any given time. I'd recommend to grab no less than a 550 watt unit for a build like this, and stick to at least the C tier or better on the PSU tier list. I'll have some alternate options down in the description because power supply prices are definitely a moving target. For the case, we've got the Gamdius Talos E3 in white, which I was able to pick up for $55 on sale. This fits the overall look that we were going for, and is actually my first time building in this. I think it looks great aesthetically with 3 included ARGB fans, 2 in the front, 1 in the rear, which can either be controlled by a button on the case or be plugged into a motherboard 5V header to be controlled via software. Other than that though, it's pretty basic. It's got breakaway expansion slot covers, no rubber grommets for the cable cutouts, no cable management raceway in the back, no special mechanisms for attaching the glass and the metal side panels, but that's all mostly expected given its low price. Alright, I saved the best for last, the graphics card. Or graphics cards, I should say. For a build price at $700, spending $250 on the GPU is a pretty good balance. It's a bit over 1/3 of the total budget and gets you something that will easily handle pretty much everything at 1080p and also be able to do a lot at 1440p. For Intel, we have the Arc A750. It is $250 pretty much all the time ever since it's seen its price drop. From AMD, we've got some tough competition because the RX 6600 XT is often around this price as well. Almost every single week, I see at least one deal for it down to around $260. Now, that's a hair over $250, but I decided to choose it for this comparison because it's closer than the RX 6600 non-XT is. Those are usually around like $220 or so. So between both cards, I think the XT is closer in price. And for Nvidia, man, I don't even know what to say about Nvidia. Performance-wise, we should be comparing the RTX 3060 to these two because that would be a much closer match. But unfortunately, we can't because it's still priced ridiculously high right now at around $330. Yes, 2 years after its release, it still hasn't seen any notable price drop from MSRP. The RTX 3050, on the other hand, is actually the closest price card that they have to offer. But it's even a struggle to find a 3050 at its supposed $250 launch price. It's often $270, so it's the most expensive of these three cards. But as you see later on in the benchmarks, it's the weakest by a long shot. And no, I don't care if RTX 3060s can be found for a bit cheaper in the used market. This is a comparison based on how much they can be found for brand new. There's not enough Intel cards floating around in the used market at this point in time due to it being so much newer, so it wouldn't be fair to look at used pricing. So it's a three-way battle between the ARC A750, the RX 6600 XT, and the RTX 3050. Before that though, let's take a quick look at the overall build summary and price breakdown. Depending on what card is chosen, we're coming in right around that targeted $700 price point before tax. I think everything is pretty well balanced in this build. No major corners were cut to get it down to this price. Some value-oriented parts were definitely used, but it's all within the scope of the target budget. Here's a quick time-lapse of the build sequence, followed by some glamour shots of the completed system. Alright, time for the benchmarks. I tested all the titles at 1440p in order to force the bottleneck into the GPUs, since we are working with an i3-12100F here. Don't get me wrong, I like seeing when reviewers pair these lower to mid-tier cards with like an uber expensive i9 or Ryzen 9 to eliminate any chance of a CPU bottleneck, but I also think it's important and useful to see comparisons in more realistic pairings too. Like I think way more people will actually pair these cards with an i3 than those higher end processors. If you don't like the way I do it, then also check out the other channels that do it the other way. You know, get some variety in your sources before making an informed decision. Testing parameters are all going to be listed on screen with regards to like the driver versions being used, the Windows version, and all that good stuff. So yeah, let's take a look at the numbers. We'll go in alphabetical order. So first up is Apex Legends at max settings. I test in the shooting range for a side-by-side comparison like this because it allows me to do the exact same pass each time without any outside influence. In Apex, the A750 takes the victory with the 6600 XT trailing behind by 11% and the 3050 behind by 39%. All the percentages I show will be relative to the A750 performance as reference. Next up is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This was tested at the preset medium settings in the large town of London, and here the 6600 XT has a very large 32% lead over the A750, while the 3050 trails behind by 9%. This isn't too surprising as Assassin's Creed typically performs better on AMD cards from what I've seen in the past. In the newest Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, using the built-in multiplayer benchmark at preset balance settings, I first tested with no upscaling at all. Here, the RX 6600 XT has a wide 41% lead over the A750, and the 3050, unsurprisingly, performs the worst. I also tested Modern Warfare 2 using the respective upscaling technologies, that is, Intel with their XeSS, AMD with FSR, and Nvidia with DLSS, all set to their performance presets. Interestingly here, we do see the 3050 closing the gap with the A750, but AMD comes out as a clear victor with more than a 70% lead over the other two cards. CSGO is an older title running on DirectX 9. At launch, the Intel Arc GPUs were pretty underwhelming when it came to older APIs like DX9 and DX11, and this was one of the titles that saw a big performance uplift in the recent driver updates. Here, I ran the workshop benchmark map at max settings, and even with the newest driver update for the Arc card, the RX 6600 XT still takes the victory by a decently large margin of 38%. The 3050 comes in last, and do note that all three cards took a huge hit to the 1% lows performance, mainly due to the smoke portion of the test that tanks the FPS. Next is Cyberpunk 2077, which I tested at medium settings, and I've got 4 different test configurations I checked out. First is the baseline with no ray tracing and no upscaling, just raw rasterization performance. None of these cards were able to hit that coveted 60 FPS average, with the RX 6600 XT getting the closest, beating the A750 by 17%, and the 3050 trails the A750 by 21%. Taking a look at the cards with upscaling enabled, with the A750 and 6600 XT using FSR, since DLSS is not available to them, and the 3050 making use of DLSS, we do see favorable performance uplifts across the board. All 3 cards now manage to get over 60 FPS, with the 3050 leading the pack surprisingly, and the A750 actually coming in last, but not by much. A rare victory for the 3050, we're not going to see too much of that. Now let's take a look at ray tracing turned on before any upscaling. Right off the bat, we can see that all 3 cards have horrible performance with no upscaling, as expected. Remember, we're talking about a AAA title that's already demanding with regular rasterization. Add in the fact that it's 1440p and you have ray tracing turned on? Yeah, of course it's not going to do well. The A750 takes the lead here, and the RX 6600 XT actually comes in dead last place. And last, we have the results with both ray tracing and upscaling enabled. Here, Intel barely squeezes by with the victory, and I think it's that ray tracing performance that's carrying it here, because earlier we saw it come in last place with only upscaling, but it led in the ray tracing only, so mixing the two together, the ray tracing was good enough to help it get the W. Next is Far Cry 6, which I used the built-in benchmark to test at high settings. The RX 6600 XT takes the lead, followed by the A750, and in last again is the 3050. I do want to note though, and you can see it on the screen right here, that the A750 was having some graphical issues with this title. This was the only title I experienced this in. Nothing else had anything like this. I mean, it still ran smoothly, average and 1% low frame rates were fine. It was just artifacting pretty badly. This also happened in story mode gameplay. It was actually worse there, to the point where it was unplayable, and nothing I did was able to fix it. I removed the drivers using DDU, and I did a fresh reinstall. I verified the game files, I reinstalled the game, and nothing worked. I'm not sure how widespread of a problem this is, because I've seen other benchmarks out there with the Intel Arc cards and Far Cry 6 performing just fine, but I've also come across some Reddit posts showing Far Cry 6 having artifacting problems in general, even with AMD and Nvidia cards. So I wouldn't blame Intel Arc cards on this one. In Fortnite, at the max preset high settings with the 3D resolution increased to 100%, the RX 6600 XT gets the W, averaging 10% higher FPS than the A750, while the 3050 comes in 26% slower than it. For Halo Infinite, at preset high settings, we get a victory for the A750. It barely edges out the RX 6600 XT, and both cards have a sizable lead over the 3050. Hogwarts Legacy is one of the newer titles in my benchmarking suite at the moment, and it's a pretty tough game to run. So I turned it down to the preset low settings for these cards. Here, the RX 6600 XT leads the A750 by 16%, and the 3050 trails it by 25%. Note that the 6600 XT is the only card able to achieve triple-digit FPS. Now let's take a look at what happens when we turn on their respective upscale settings. All 3 cards get an uplift in performance. They all now average over 100 FPS. However, the RX 6600 XT still holds on to first place. But it's very notable that the RTX 3050 really closes the gap between itself and the A750 here, in both average and 1% lows. League of Legends is kind of an interesting game because it's not really graphics intensive, and it doesn't fully utilize all the cores and threads of modern day processors. Thus, you have lower utilization in both the CPU and GPU compared to most other more demanding titles. Here, despite the Arc card getting the latest driver updates for improved performance, it still comes in last place. That's not to say that it performed badly though. The numbers were still very good overall. The other 2 cards were just a bit over 10% better than it. Surprisingly, the RTX 3050 performs almost identical to the RX 6600 XT. In Rainbow Six Siege with DX11 at ultra settings and 100% render scale, the RX 6600 XT takes first place. It should be noted though that before the new driver updates, ARC cards performed horribly in DX11 in this title. We're talking less than triple digit FPS, which for a game like Rainbow Six Siege is really bad. That has been improved, but I don't see much reason for anyone to run it in DX11 if Vulkan is available and gets you better numbers, as you can see here where the ARC card gets a huge bump in performance, closing the gap between it and the 6600 XT. The 3050 actually takes a minor hit in performance on Vulkan compared to DX11 and comes in last place. Sorry about the weird Riva Tuner on-screen display scaling. It decided to break specifically on Rainbow Six Siege and couldn't be scaled smaller when I got to the ARC card. Sons of the Forest is the last title I tested, and it's in early access as of the release of this video, but it's a highly anticipated title, one that I'm personally super excited about, so I wanted to check it out in this comparison. This game looks great graphics wise, but it's pretty hard to run. I had to use the preset low settings, and even then the performance wasn't the best. The RX 6600 XT leads by a large margin here, the only card to run over 60 FPS, and the A750 falls in last place, which isn't too surprising. This game, despite being new, is running on DX11, and it's not fully released yet, so we may need to be patient and give Intel some time to release specific driver updates catered to it in the future. And to wrap up all the testing, I took a look at simultaneous recording and streaming performance. Now, my focus wasn't on image quality here, like I wasn't nitpicking pixels or anything like that. That's beyond the scope of this video and is a deep rabbit hole in itself. What I was mainly focusing on is, given that we're running with a more entry-level i3, can these cards handle taking the load off of the CPU with their respective hardware encoders on the GPU? So long as the image quality wasn't complete hot garbage, they get a pass. And all three of these cards did well in my opinion. I tested in Halo Infinite because it's a fast-paced game that already has pretty high baseline load on both the CPU and GPU, and adding in recording and streaming on top of it, we do see a small drop in performance across the board, represented by the red numbers, with the gray baseline performance numbers there for reference and comparison. I would consider all of these results still very playable, and the image quality as a result of the streaming and recording was good. The A750 still takes the victory here, followed by the 6600 XT, and last is the 3050. I'm just going to show you all the results summed up in one chart here. Feel free to pause the screen if you want. There's a lot of bars and numbers, but it's pretty easy to see that the RX 6600 XT is the overall winner. Now, I would like to add that it was nice to see the ARC A750 take some victories like in Apex Legends and Halo Infinite and the Cyberpunk ray tracing tests. The RTX 3050 really only saw one victory with Cyberpunk using DLSS, though it did almost tie for first in the League of Legends test with the RX 6600 XT. Now, if I'm going to be honest, all three of these cards gave very playable experiences for how much the build total was. Remember, this build came in at $700. I gave it a harder time by testing in 1440p. These will all blow 1080p gaming out of the water, and I don't think many people would complain if you drop this build with any of these cards in front of them and let them have at it and start gaming. Now, for the people who are chasing the most performance per dollar though, that's a different story. Those people would not and should not consider the RTX 3050 at all, unless they have some special use case. I've actually met people in that exact scenario. Preference towards AMD or Nvidia?
Generally Nvidia, but that's also kind of work-related stuff. I do a lot of data science, and the tensor cores on there I use a lot for work.
Okay. But aside from that, the 3050 should mostly be ignored if you are a gamer, in my opinion. It's just horrible value. Before, you could kind of lean on the DLSS as a reason to get it, but with the other upscaling tech out there now, I don't think that's as valid of a talking point anymore. And between AMD and Intel, I think the choice is pretty clear. Get the RX 6600 XT if you want the best performance across most of the games, and grab the A750 if maybe you're specifically playing the games that it got first place in, or if you want to, support the third horse in this GPU race. Also, if you are particularly interested in AV1 hardware encoding, which I didn't cover in this video because that's a whole nother animal, but it's kind of like the Nvidia Tensor Core thing. If you have a special use case for AV1, whether it be for streaming with less data usage or for archiving smaller sized videos, It's hard to put a dollar value on that to compare with. It's very case dependent, and I will say though, while I personally find more value in the AMD card at this point in time, I'm very pleased with what Intel has achieved so far, and I am very hopeful for what they have planned for the future. I have no doubt in my mind that they're definitely going to put pressure on both AMD and Nvidia, and that is a very good thing. Alright, I'm pretty sure this video is getting long enough as it is by this point, so let's get to the closing question of the day. Hypothetically, for the next year, if you had to use one of these three cards exclusively for everything you do, that's gaming, that's streaming, video editing, whatever else you do with the graphics card, which one are you choosing for your own personal system? Is it going to be the RX 6600 XT, the RTX 3050, or the ARC A750? Which card are you going with? Let me know down in the comments below. Let's see what everyone picks. Other than that though, I hope you all enjoyed and found this either useful or entertaining in one way or another. I want to thank you all as always for watching and for continuing to support the channel. And thanks to the channel members for their above and beyond support. Be safe out there, and I will see you all down in the comments as well as in the next stream and or video. Bye.